Now we can look into various working capital policies and strategies. That is, all organizations, they will invest in current assets and fixed assets through long-term sources of finance or short-term sources of finance. So here, our policy is to find out what are the different strategies adopted by an organization to invest in our current assets, whether they are using long-term assets or whether they are using short-term, whether they are using long-term finance or short-term finance to invest in current assets. That is, we have to go through. So every organization, they are following different policies or strategies for this purpose. So the first one is, that is working capital, we can denote it as working capital policies or strategies. The first one is matching policy. So what is meant by matching policy? So under matching policy, a firm will find out a policy where the investment in current asset or the time span of investment in current asset and the loan taken period will be equal. For example, if the organization is purchasing a plant and the plant will have a lifespan of 10 years and the company is taking a loan for 10 years only. So by the time the asset become useless, what will happen? Our liability will also be over. So this is the matching policy. That is, a life of the asset should be matched with the maturity of the sources of finance. Understood? Life of the asset should be matched with the maturity of the sources of finance, whether it is long term or whether it is short. This is matching policy. So financing strategy of matching policies can be denoted as follows. That is, long-term funds equal to fixed assets plus total permanent current asset. That is, long-term funds will be equivalent to what? Fixed assets and total permanent current assets. And short-term funds will be equal to total temporary current asset. Total temporary current assets. Once again, I will tell you the financial strategy for matching policy is that long-term funds will be equal to fixed assets plus total permanent current assets. And short-term funds will be utilized for what? Total temporary current assets. So once again, I will tell you the concept. That is, under matching concept, the life of the asset should be matched with the life of the sources of finance. Okay, over. Now, the second now we can see what are the reasons for matching policy. How will be the profit factor under matching policy? I will tell you, with the short-term financing, the interest cost should be low and therefore help profit, but the assets being less liquid will not help return. That is, under matching policy, the profit factor will be less because we will have to pay more interest. So the profit factor will be less under matching policy. Then the next one is the risk factor. The risk factor is also high. The risk factor will also be high. Okay. Now we can see the second method, that is conservative policy. Under conservative policy, there will be low profit and low risk. That is good. Low profit and low risk. And here what is happening? The financing policy will be equivalent to, or it depends more on long-term funds for financing needs. The companies permanently employing long-term funds for financing current assets. No other funds. Always long-term funds are being used to purchase current assets. Here the risk is also low and the profit is also very low. Because the time span is high, so we have to pay interest and interest. So the expenses will be high. So the profit will be low. And risk factor, that will be also low because we are in a hurry to pay off the liabilities. We can pay off the liabilities slowly and slowly. That is the second point. So the first one is matching policy. Here the theme is that the life of the asset and the sources of the time span for the sources of finance will also be equal. Both should be equal. If the life is 10 years, the sources of finance is also for 10 years. Okay. And under conservative policy, the company or the organization is always using long-term funds to finance the current assets. So the second part is over. And in the second case, here profit factor is low, and what is also low? Risk factor is also low. In the case of matching policy, the profit is low. Profit is very low. And at the same time, the risk factor is high. Here, both are low. Profit is also low and risk is also low. And the third method is aggressive policy. Aggressive policy means, under aggressive policy, the company is following the idea of putting short-term financing for all the purchase of asset. They are using only short-term finance. So what will happen to the profit factor? The profit factor will be very high because our interest payment period is very less. And risk factor, that is also that the interest rates could go up, resulting in a higher interest expenses, and the risk is very high. Profit is high, but the risk is high. Profit is also high and the risk is also high. Greater profit, greater risk. Okay, and the last one is zero working capital policy. Zero working capital means there is no difference between current assets and current liabilities. We are having one current asset and you are having one current liability. With whatever we are having, the business is being continued. We are having zero working capital with us, and with that we are going ahead. So here, total current assets equal to total current liabilities. Total current assets minus total current liability will be equal to 0. So I will again explain. 4 policies are there. First one is matching policy. Under matching policy, the life of the asset and the sources of finance should be equal. Life of the asset and sources of finance should be equal. And here the profit factor is very low. Profit factor is very low. In the second case, conservative policy, the organization is always using long-term finance as a sources of current assets or fixed assets also. They are using only long-term sources of finance. Here what is happening? We are getting less profit, or there are chances of getting low profit, and at the same time the risk will be also low, because we are not not forced to pay back our liabilities within a short span of time. Anytime we can pay within that long-term period for which we have taken the finance. So the second case, that is conservative policy, profit is also low and risk is also low. And the third one is aggressive policy. Under aggressive policy, the company is taking a great risk. They are using only short-term finance for either to purchase current assets or to purchase long-term assets. They are using what only? They are using only short-term assets. Okay, so here what is happening? The profit is also very high and the risk is also very high. Profit is high and the risk is high. And the fourth one is zero working capital policy, where we are not having any working capital with us. Always the current assets will be equal to current liabilities, or we can say total current assets equal to total current liabilities, or total current assets minus total current liabilities equal to 0. So these are the 4 policies or strategies, working capital strategies adopted by an organization. Once again, I will pinpoint the points, that is matching policy, aggressive policy, conservative policy, and zero working capital policy. Okay, so these are the working capital policies and strategies. Now we can look into the classification of working capital. The classification of working capital can be made under 2 heads, that is according to the concepts, on the basis of concept and on the basis of time. On the basis of concepts, we have already classified it in the beginning. That is gross working capital and net working capital. Gross working capital means the amount invested in current assets only. Net working capital means the difference between current assets and current liabilities. So that part is over. And on the basis of time, it can be classified as permanent or fixed working capital or temporary or variable working capital. Permanent or fixed working capital or temporary or variable working capital. This permanent or fixed working capital can again be classified as regular working capital and reserve working capital. And the temporary or variable working capital can be classified as seasonal working capital and special working capital. Again, I will repeat it. That is, working capital can be classified according to the concept and according to the time. According to concept, it can be classified as what are they? Gross working capital and net working capital. According to time, it can be classified as permanent or fixed working capital or temporary or variable working capital. The permanent or fixed working capital can again be classified as regular working capital and reserve working capital. The temporary working capital can be classified as seasonal working capital and special working capital. Okay, so what is meant by regular working capital? Regular working capital means the working capital which is required for the regular activities of the concern. It's clear from the term. What is reserve working capital? Even though we are having sufficient regular working capital with us, we have to keep some amount as a reserve to meet contingencies. That is reserve working capital. So these two are coming under permanent or fixed working capital. And in the case of temporary working capital, it can be classified as seasonal working capital and special working capital. Seasonal working capital means during different seasons, there may be requirements for more and more working capital. That is, according to seasonal variations, the working capital requirements will also change. That is seasonal working capital. And special working capital means during certain special occasions, there may be need for more special working capital. So the classification is over. Once again, I will repeat it. That is, classification or kinds of working capital can be made according to the concepts and according to the time, or on the basis of concepts or on the basis of time. On the basis of concepts, we can classify it as gross working capital and net working capital, and on the basis of time, we can classify it as permanent or fixed working capital and temporary or variable working capital. The permanent or fixed working capital can again be classified as regular working capital and reserve working capital, and temporary working capital can be seasonal working capital and special working capital. So these are the various classification kinds of working capital. Now the last point, that is, what are the different factors affecting the working capital requirements? What are the different factors which may affect the working capital requirements of a firm? We can see, first one is the nature or character of business. According to the nature or character of business, the requirements of working capital will also change. There will be changes in the working capital requirements according to the changes in the nature or character of the business. That is the first factor which is affecting working capital requirements of a firm. And the second one is size of business. What is the size of a business? Size of your business. Whether it is a medium firm, whether it's a large firm, whether it's a small firm. According to the structure or according to the size of the business, your requirements of working capital will also change. Next one is, what is your production policy? Which policies are being used for production? That will also affect. And the next one is, what are the different manufacturing process adopted by you? Whether you are using manual process, whether you are using mechanical process, or fully automatic or semi-automatic. So according to the production manufacturing process adopted by you, the amount invested in working capital will also, or the requirement of working capital for your firm will also change. Then what are the seasonal variations occurring? What is your working capital cycle? What is your risk turnover? What is your credit policy? What is your business policy? What is the earning capacity and dividend policy followed by your firm, and what is the price level changes in the economy, what are the tax level. This will also affect the working capital requirements of your firm. Once again, I will repeat the factors. That is, what are the different factors affecting working capital requirements of a firm. The first one is nature or character of business. Second one is size of business. Third one is the production policy. Fourth one is the manufacturing process. Then the other factors which will affect are seasonal variations, working capital cycle, and rate of risk, then credit policy and dividend policy. What are the business cycles? What are the price level changes occurring in the economy, and tax level? Various other factors are also there, but we can conform to these points. So these are the different factors affecting working capital requirements.